Welcome back, this is Goku-san DBZ. This is just a special vlog, a little discussion, I guess you could say, for a few minutes on the three eras of Star Wars. Now we have one of the reasons I chose to wear this. Overall, I'm gonna give a little bit of my opinion, and yeah, we've had three eras so far of Star Wars. Now this is including grading the three eras between TV shows, comic books, video games, movies, everything, the overall picture. Now, each era is given stuff, but I'd rather get this out of the way. First off, we had the first era of Star Wars, of course, with classics. But for me, even though I wear Return of the Jedi, in my opinion, the best of the first generation is none other than, of course, A New Hope. For me personally, is my number one favorite Star Wars movie of the first generation or first era of Star Wars. But we got great trilogy overall, quality wise. We got Star Wars Episode 4, Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So pretty solid overall from this era. In video games, we got some not so great games from, of course, Atari and stuff. Towards the end of the first generation of Star Wars, we got some of the most brutal, hard platformers of all time, but still arguably considered classics today. And that being, of course, the Super Star Wars trilogy. Trying to show all three together like that. There we go. But yeah, we got true classic, good hardcore platformers. Pretty solid games overall, in my opinion. Easily the best games from the first generation of Star Wars. Comic books, the early Star Wars comics from Marvel, not so great overall quality. Plus, we got some pretty crappy cartoon shows out of the first generation of Star Wars, though the movies were superb. The games are 50-50 from the era. Though we had great trilogy of Super Star Wars games, we got a lot of bad games as well from the era. And cartoons, we got the Star Wars Ewok animated series. Yeah, it actually exists, and yeah, it actually has Star Wars on the top, not just called Ewoks, like the two live-action Ewok movies, which I'm not going to include in Generation 1 Star Wars just because Star Wars is not actually mentioned in the two Ewok movies. But still, the animated cartoon does count, and so does the Droids animated series, which is also pretty much utter crap in my opinion. Both cartoons suck, though I will say the Ewok animated show is probably just a little bit better quality-wise than the Droid show. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And of course, though, unfortunately, also the first generation of Star Wars even includes the arguably very hated from most people, the Star Wars Holiday Special. Yes, though it's not canon, funny enough, that would be where the first appearance of Boba Fett actually comes in, is from the Holiday Special, believe it or not. But overall, ranking everything together, combined, the good with the bad combined together, not strictly looking at the positive, but looking at negative and positive combined. Overall, I think the first generation of the three generations of Star Wars, I feel overall gets a, I'm gonna give it a B minus, the overall generation. Yeah, that's not the greatest score, but I think it's pretty decent overall. Yeah, it definitely lowers because of the Droid cartoon, especially the holiday special, some of the very bad, not so great, mediocre video games. Though, still, I think the Super Star Wars games do help kind of even the playing field on the games to an average overall rating. Though the movies are superb, still, they get pulled down a little by some of the other elements since I'm looking at the overall picture. With that said, I'm going to quickly skip the second generation for now of Star Wars to the third generation, the Disney era of Star Wars. Now, in comic books and stuff, of course, we've gotten some pretty good stuff from the new era of Star Wars. I mean, we got, though, of course, non-original stuff, really, just comic book adaptation of course, the films, like you see here of The Force Awakens and other stuff. And the movies are a mixed bag for me, of course, of the films that have come out so far, overall combined wise. Now, just the movies themselves rating, if I combine together all those Disney era movies, I'd probably give it a C overall. Because I liked The Force Awakens, I loved Rogue One. I'm so on Solo, and I absolutely hate and despise The Last Jedi. But with that said, the comic books are a mixed bag as well. Overall, I would probably give the comic books maybe a B minus to regular B. Though we do have some really good comics, we have a lot of unoriginal stuff also from this era of Star Wars comics, unfortunately. Though there's been some good stuff. In the game department, so far this generation, the Star Wars games get pretty much a D for me. I mean, in my opinion, the first Battlefront game is actually not super bad. But if I was to give a grade, I give this one a C overall rating. A C to a C plus at best. It's not a bad game, don't get me wrong, but Battlefront 2 really brings it down, and it remains to be seen how Star Wars The Jedi Fallen Order will be. That still remains to be seen. Hard to say yet on that. But yeah, Battlefront 2 though sucks big time, in my opinion. Especially with the loot boxes and microtransaction crap, is way worse than what was in this game. Overall, I give the Disney era of Star Wars, like I said, era 1, I give like a B minus to the original era of Star Wars, a B minus to a B regular. I give the Star Wars era, or rather Disney era of Star Wars, I'm giving it a C to a C minus, a grade lower. Definitely overall, so yeah. It's going to get like a C minus for the third generation of Star Wars. First generation gets, yeah, B. So, overall, not great. Plus, I didn't care much from what I saw of the Poe Dameron series so far out. I will say the only really positive thing I have to say about this generation of Star Wars from Disney, like I said, is the Rogue One movie is superb, very well done, and Star Wars Rebels series also. I give Rebels as a show probably a B plus to an A minus. It's a really good series. Yeah, B plus. So overall, yes, Star Wars Disney era gets a C. Now let's talk about Generation 2 of Star Wars, which is my favorite era of Star Wars, of the three eras. One, this era technically begins in like the mid-90s, stretches all the way to like the mid to late 2000s. Because the Disney era doesn't count until Disney bought Lucas, which was about 2012. So, we have, that's easily the longest span, though, of Star Wars, so maybe it's giving a little unfair advantage, given how far the span is for the second generation. From early on, we had some not necessarily great books, but still enjoy quite a bit. Short stories I personally really liked, like Zorba the Hutt, or rather, Zorba the Hutt's Revenge, which is one I personally like. And yeah, that's supposed to be Jabba's father, with a beard and stuff. Kind of weird, I know, but it's kind of funny. And I like the villain Trioculus. And by the way, there's a character in this series of 3 books named Snoke. Fun little fact. But overall, I like the novels and stuff from this generation, but we start early on in Generation 2 with books like this. We get some of the best, easily probably the best era of Star Wars comic books is from the second generation, the Dark Horse era of Star Wars comics, and incredible pieces of art such as Shadows of the Empire, which is one of my personal all-time favorites from this generation of Star Wars. Yeah, I think overall this is easily the best era of Star Wars comic books, and easily the best era of Star Wars video games, and in general, I think of Star Wars novels. I mean, my number one favorite Star Wars novel is actually from this era, towards the end. And that being Star Wars Darth Plagueis. Easily my favorite overall Star Wars novel of all time. Also from this era, early on, we got great games like on the Nintendo 64, such as Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. We also got games like Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Incredible, really fun games. The original Battlefront games, of course. Towards later on in this generation, we had incredible games like Star Wars The Force Unleashed 1. Unleashed 2, not so great, but the first Star Wars Unleashed game, arguably in the top 3, probably top 3 to 5 best Star Wars games of all time. Seriously, if you've never played the game, you've got to play it just to check out the awesome character that is Starkiller. Now, easily the best Star Wars games of all time, in my opinion, also came from this generation, of course. Thanks to a little console called the Xbox, and a little company called BioWare, would produce arguably the best Star Wars games of all time. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, with amazing characters like Revan, Darth Malak, and Darth Nihilus. It's hard to mirror sometimes all the Sith names. Excuse me. Yeah, but Revan, Darth Nihilus, Darth Malgus. Darth Malak, and then you have Darth Malgus of course, in the MMO game, Old Republic, as well as characters like Darth Nihilus, Lord Scourge, and many other greats. That's one of the big things about the second generation of Star Wars. It gave us the Old Republic era. And of course, the prequel trilogy, and arguably the best TV show to come out of Star Wars. Of course, that being Star Wars Clone Wars series, which in my opinion, overall, if I gave a rank, of course, I give Rebels like an B+. I give Clone Wars an A+. And overall, if I was to rate the original prequel trilogy overall, I would say, give or take, this is, of course, easily my favorite Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Easily my favorite of the prequel movies, and probably most people. And I think this trilogy has actually aged much better, especially compared to the Disney era of Star Wars. Overall, if I was overall to rank just the prequel trilogy on itself, I give the prequel trilogy a B. It's a solid trilogy, honestly. Going overall, I give, honestly, Phantom Menace, I'd probably give a B-. Yeah, much higher than most people. I give Attack of the Clones probably a B. And of course, I give Revenge of the Sith an A+. Overall, I give the second generation of Star Wars, like I said, Disney era gets a C. The other, With the Good and the Bad, Generation 1, gets like a B+. Well, B to B+. But this era of Star Wars, I'm giving Generation 2 Star Wars an A. Overall, quality-wise, A to A+ range. So yeah, easily, in my opinion, Generation 2 of Star Wars, the second era of Star Wars, is the best era of Star Wars. In my opinion, prequel haters can hate all they want, but in my opinion, still overall quality-wise, it doesn't matter how much you may not like the Star Wars prequel era. Overall, when you look at video games, comic books, multimedia all around, the second generation of Star Wars is easily the best generation. Regardless of how much, even though I respect his opinion, I arguably very much disagree with John Campea on it. He has a blind hatred for the prequels, and I will never understand it. To this day, I have always been a hardcore defender of the prequels, and I always will be a defender of the prequels. It is my favorite era of Star Wars, and I will defend it to my dying breath. I will defend the prequels. Even people who used to bash on it are starting to realize the Star Wars era is making the prequel era look far better and far superior in quality. So thank you, Jeremy Jahns, to finally coming to your senses and joining the right side. Now, if only could get through to the idiots like John Campea for their blind hatred for the prequels, and yet for some reason a big major defender of Disney era. I can't figure out John Campea's mindset. Then again, it's hard to say. I mean, he's Canadian, though that's not a attack to Canada. Even though he comes from there, and a lot of bad music comes from there. To be fair, America's produced a lot of bad music too. But anyways, that's a tangent or a rant for another time. But I'll cut up for now. Tell me, leave a comment below. What is your favorite era of Star Wars? What's your favorite media form of Star Wars? Video games, novels, comic books, movies, / TV shows. Tell me, what in your opinion is the worst stuff in the Star Wars franchise, and what is the best in the franchise? I'm curious to hear other people's opinions on this. Do you think the Disney era is the best? Do you think, like me, that Generation 2 is the best, with the prequels and everything? Or are you one of the old school fans who will defend the original trilogy, like John Campea? I'm curious. Leave a comment below. Let me know. And I'll see y'all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel.